3-2 rational numbers. So here's a diagram that kind of shows us some of the different sets or types of numbers that we have. The n in the middle is kind of those basic numbers, the numbers that when you first start to count, those are those numbers. So for example, 1, 2, 3, so on and so forth. Those are actually called natural numbers. They are the numbers that you naturally learned to count with. The next set of numbers of the circle here is the W, which represents the whole numbers. And these are kind of the next set of numbers that you learn to count, but this is where you actually included the 0. So when you first started counting, you always started with 1. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. But as you progressed on, you learned that 0 was part of a number. So the whole numbers include 0 as well as the natural numbers. The next set that we have is written here by Z, and these are the integers. And the integers include the whole numbers, so 0, 1, 2, 3, and on. It includes the natural numbers, 1, 2, and 3, but it also includes negative numbers. So -3, -2, -1, 0, 1, 2, 3, and so on. So all of these kind of components go together. And then the last set are Q, which are the rational numbers. The rational numbers include all of the previous sets we've talked about, and a rational number is any number that can be written as a fraction. So if you can write any of the numbers, so the integers, the whole numbers, or the natural numbers, or any other number as a fraction, then it's considered a rational number. We're first going to look at how to write mixed numbers and integers as fractions. So if we look here, we have 4 2/3, and if we want to write that as a fraction, it would actually be called an improper fraction. And to do that, you take, you kind of go in a circle motion. So you do 4 times 3, which is 12. You add the numerator, so 14, and then you keep the denominator, which is 3. The reason it's called improper is because the numerator is greater than the denominator. Now, if we're trying to just write the number 7 as a fraction, every number that we know, any integer that we know, can be written as a fraction form, and we just put it over 1. So this 7 is just 7 over 1, and that's the fraction form of 7. Writing terminating decimals as fractions is very similar to just writing an integer as a fraction. So you first want to figure out what your denominator is going to be. And to do that, you have to figure out what your place value is. So in this case, our place value is the hundredths. So my denominator is going to be 100. And then you just take the number and you make that your numerator. So 64 would be my numerator. But when we're writing fractions, we need to make sure that we always put them in simplest form. So if we're trying to reduce this down, we can start by dividing by 2. And 64 divided by 2 is 32. 50 divided by 2, or 100 divided by 2 is 50. Sorry. Then we can simplify again, so we can divide by 2 again. And we get 16 over 25. Nothing goes into 16 and 25, so our fraction for 64 hundredths is 16 over 25. We also can have 5.875, and we can represent that. When you have a whole number, you want to put that out in front of your fraction. And again, we determine that this is 875 over 1,000, because that's our place value. And if we simplify down, we end up getting 5 7/8 for our simplified fraction of decimals. We can also write repeating decimals as fractions, but it's a little bit of a trickier process. So you first want to let n represent the number. So in this situation, we're going to say n equals 0.66 repeating. Now we're going to multiply both sides by n. So you multiply by n, so we get 10n equals 10 times 0.66 repeating. Now the reason we're multiplying by 10 is because one digit repeats. We only have one digit that repeats. If it was multiple digits that repeated, we would be changing it. But since the 6 is the number that repeats, and it's after the decimal, it's one place value, so it's a 10. So 10 times both sides. So then we would get 10n equals, and now this would be 6.66 repeating. So from here, you want to subtract n from 10n to eliminate the repeating part, because we know that n is 0.6666. So if you subtract n from both sides, so we subtract n from here, we would be left with 9n, and if we subtract the n from the other side, but it was the number value of n, we would be left with 6. So now we have 9n equals 6. If you divide both sides by 9, you get 9/6. So n, or 6/9, I'm sorry, 6/9. And if you enter this into a calculator and you did 6 divided by 9, you would get 0.66666 repeating. Pause the video to try a few examples. You're going to write each number in its simplest fraction. So for the first one, 0.84, the fraction is 21 over 25. Remember, you always have to simplify. For 9.675, your fraction is 9/27 over 40. And the fraction for 0.4222 repeating is 14 over 33. So here's another diagram showing the rational numbers, integers, and whole numbers, and it's just kind of a different way to see it because it has the different kinds of numbers that you will see in each set. So please copy this diagram down with the numbers so that you're able to identify rational numbers, integers, and whole numbers. You will have to label some of those, so you may be given a number and you're going to have to label and tell me if it's an integer, a whole number, or a rational number. Pause the video to complete the lesson review. Write each decimal as a fraction or mixed number. Write each number as a fraction.